Welcome to ESPN's High School Football Scoreboard Show by ESPN Orlando. I'm Heath Ziglar. You know this guy, Baylin Trujillo. We're going to break down the RPI for this week. It's our fourth show. Baylin, there's some teams that have made their way in, a couple teams that made their way out, and we've got a couple local teams that still have a shot at one of those coveted wild card spots.
Yeah, man, after these district championship games this past week, we kind of know where every team sits right now. Some interesting teams have moved up right on the outside of the top 8 teams to go to playoffs in each division. There's some teams where there's multiple districts that have a lot of teams in it, which is pretty interesting. There's one district in particular that has, I think, 5 teams, Heath, in one district, which is crazy. But yeah, we're going to dive into that a little bit into the show. Hope you guys enjoy it. But again, this is episode 4 from Graffiti Junction in College Park. Again, after this show, you should know where most teams are lined up for the playoffs. Last week was definitely interesting, and then this next week is the final week of football.
Like Baylin said, we'll go over every automatic bid. We'll give you the wild card spots that are left. We'll give you the teams that are going to be in possibly, and the teams that are possibly on the bubble. Let's start with 8A Region 1. Okay, Baylin at the top of 8A Region 1. No surprise again, Seminole just remains at the top. Bartram trails right behind them. Apopka, the local team, at number 3. DeLand with the big win over Flagler Palm Coast stays at 4. But see, here's the surprising thing, Baylin. Flagler Palm Coast does not fall. They stay right where they are at number 5. Number 6 is Timber Creek. They're going to have the automatic bid. Obviously, they're the district champs. Props to them. Spruce Creek's at 7 and Mandarin's at 8. But the story is, Baylin, who's the team we've been writing off all year that is right there at the number 9 spot that could possibly get the next wild card?
Well, I told you, Heath, a couple weeks ago that they were completely done, and now they said the 9 spot, Lake Brantley. They've won a couple games, big upsets the last couple weeks in their district. I again read them off a couple weeks ago. We weren't even talking about them, I think, the last 2 episodes. Now they said the 9 spot. They do have a game against Harmony this week at Harmony, so it'll be interesting to see how that lines up with the whole points. Is this another Winter Park situation, Heath, where they play a team, maybe blow out a Harmony team and then end up not making it? Mandarin is right in front of them, the state champ from last year. Again, they have to win this week to solidify themselves. Then as based off what we're seeing now, Heath, if Mandarin wins and they're in at the 8 spot, they have to play Seminole in week 1. Seminole was the team that last year we thought should have made the playoffs and didn't. Now they're playing the state champ in the first week. Heath, this is going to be crazy, man. What's your take?
Seminole finds a way to kind of find themselves in the weeds quite a bit.
Man.
But I guarantee you Seminole would rather play Lake Brantley than Mandarin. So right now, if Spruce Creek or Mandarin lose, Lake Brantley has a shot to move in. That's 8A Region 1 with Seminole at the top, Bartram Trail at number 2, Apopka at number 3, DeLand at 4, Flagler Palm Coast at 5, Timber Creek at 6, Spruce Creek at 7, and Mandarin at 8. But Lake Brantley and Winter Park right there at the 9 and 10 spot, hanging on for dear life. Let's move on to 8A Region 2. Okay, Baylin, over in Region 2 of 8A, it looks like the real story here is the fact that Dr. Phillips has fallen from number 1 down to number 3. There's also a team locally in Lake Nona who's sitting right outside of the cusp of getting in a wild card spot. This is going to be a big week for them. They have a game against East River, I believe. Let's break it down. We got Riverview Sarasota's at number 1, Steinbrenner's at number 2, DP, the local team's coming in at 3, Osceola, the local team, at number 4. We got Newsom at 5, Riverview at 6, Leonard at 7, Plant at 8. Now the story with Plant, if you've been watching our YouTube channel, Tampa Plant is a team that's 3 and 6 and is actually in the playoffs right now in the wild card spot because of their opponent's record. You know how I feel about that. You know how Baylin feels about that. We think it's a little bit shady. Now, the fact that Lake Nona is right behind Plant, we need Plant to either lose or Leonard to lose, and Lake Nona still has a shot. Baylin, do you think Lake Nona can actually do this?
I do. I actually think Lake Nona can get in there somehow. I think their strength of schedule with an Osceola team on their resume, obviously a Winter Park team that was 1 win away from going to district championship and obviously the playoffs. I think their strength of schedule may change after this week. They are playing a winning team in East River. I think they're 5 and 4 right now. Plant does have a 3 and 6 football team that they're playing this week at Robinson. So it'll be interesting how that lines up. If they somehow lose that game, I think Lake Nona squeaks in right there at the 8th spot. This is the first time that Lake Nona is outside of the 8. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes down to the last week. Again, Osceola did put a little punishment on them last week. So I don't know if they got to forget about that this week when they play East River so they can get that win. But again, Osceola, they're done with their season. So they have a bye week this week going into playoffs next week against Newsome, which they also are done with their season. So a lot of these teams in this region are done with their season. There's only about 3 or 4 teams remaining. That 8 right there looks like it's going to be the final 8, Heath. So what are your take on this?
So the major storylines that I take away is the fact that DP's fallen down to 3. That means obviously in the second round they could possibly be on the road now because they're not a 1 seed anymore. That could play factors into later in the season, later in the postseason. But I really would like to see Lake Nona find a way in. Obviously, in the local market, we want to see Coach Paradiso and his boys get in there. I would love to see a loss from either the 7 or 8 team so that Lake Nona can punch in. The big game to watch, I guess, this week's going to be the Lake Nona East River game. Who wins that game? Lake Nona, if they win, they still have a shot. That's 8A Region 2. Before we get into Class 7 8A, I want to thank Graffiti Junction College Park, Baylin, for everything they do for us. They obviously provide us with our meal. They sponsor our show. They've been our best sponsor of the year. Right now, I've got the Maui chicken sandwich, which is their take on the Hawaiian chicken sandwich, and he's got the Italiano, which is their take on the Italian sandwich. These are both 2 menu items that you can pick up at any Graffiti Junction location in Orlando. They've been an awesome sponsor, so thank you, Graffiti Junction.
Yes, thank you.
All right, let's look at 7A. Baylin, no surprise here. 7A is owned by Edgewater High School. They sit at the number 1 spot in Region 1. So you got Edgewater, Knightsville, Fleming Island. The other local team is Wekiva. They're at the number 4 spot, even though they won't play in the number 4 spot when the playoffs start because they're not a district champ. But they will be the highest seed non-district champs, which means they will be the 5 seed. Going down the list, there's really no other local teams except for Winter Springs punched their ticket this week with a big win against East River. That means they will. Looks like they're going to play Wekiva.
Yes, that'll be a local matchup here in Orlando in the first week of the playoffs. Wekiva and Winter Springs, a 4 and 5 matchup. Again, right now, like Heath just mentioned, Wekiva's sitting at that number 4 spot right now, but Winter Springs has punched their ticket. They aren't in the 8 yet, so if someone's looking at it right now, like, where's Winter Springs? Don't worry, guys. Winter Springs punched their ticket by winning the district championship last week against East River in a blowout win. So they're going to be at the 4 spot. Wekiva's probably going to bump down 1 to the 4 and 5, and that's going to be a great matchup. I'm sure one of us will be there. Again, a big local matchup in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and get this, Baylin. It's Wekiva versus Winter Springs at Winter Springs because Winter Springs is the district champ. Winter Springs is the district champ. They will get their first round no matter what at home. So big ups to Winter Springs High School for pulling that one off. So that's going to be it for 7A Region 1. You got Edgewater, Wekiva. Those are the 2 top dogs right now. Winter Springs slides in with the district championship. They'll probably most likely be playing Wekiva like we just said. That's going to be an awesome local matchup. The other teams in that region are going to be out of the area, but Baylin, that's going to do it for 7A Region 1. Okay, 7A Region 2. Usually it's dominated by 1 team. Baylin, who's that team?
Lakeland, no doubt.
So guess what, Baylin? Lakeland is actually at number 2 now. Stephen Armwood is actually 1 spot ahead of them. That's where RPI really does matter because your strength of schedule, they are saying basically that a 10-0 Lakeland is not as good as a 8-1 Armwood. And that's because Armwood's opponents have done better this year. So RPI does matter. That means Lakeland could possibly have an extra road game now because they're not a 1 seed in their region. These are things that can factor in down the road, something to keep an eye on. There's really no other local teams in 7A Region 2 besides St. Cloud. This is a team that we kind of have seen. They started off hot with a 5-0 start. They've kind of stumbled as of late. They still have a slight chance, but there's a team that also is kind of local. Vieira is playing Vero Beach this week. That's a great local matchup. I think that's a 7A versus 8A matchup. Baylin, let's go ahead and make a prediction on the Vieira. Who do you got in winning that one?
I actually have Vieira in the upset win. I'm going to pull for those guys. The Hawks, I think they're doing some good things this year. They've beaten some pretty good opponents. I know their district's a little weak. We've talked about that a little bit on social media. But Vieira did lose to a great Cocoa team that I think is going to go to the state championship, and also Rockledge team that's probably one of the best teams in the entire state of Florida. So I think with those 2 being their only losses, I think they have a good chance against a pretty good team, undefeated team at that they're going into play this week. I think we're trying to manage to go to that game somehow. One of us probably will be there. You never know how we're going to work that out. But and right in that same division like you just talked about with St. Cloud, they're right at the 9th spot. I think it's a little too late for them. They start off really hot. We were talking about them for, I think, 1 week in the entire season. That was when they went to 5-0 playing Osceola. We're going to see how good they were. They end up losing that game by a large margin. So, unfortunately, St. Cloud's going to be right outside of the top 8. It looks like this is a loaded top 8 teams here. But the big shocker when you just literally gave me that information that Armwood is above Lakeland right now. That's shocking because I think that Lakeland, without a doubt, is the best team in the entire state of Florida. I think in any classification, I think they match up pretty well. St. Thomas is also a team in that whole 7A, so it'll be interesting to see how they match up with a good Edgewater team, Armwood and Lakeland. But again, the playoffs are going to get real interesting in 7A, Heath.
Yeah, 7A Region 2, in my opinion, is the number one region in the state, regardless of class. This is the most loaded region. Lakeland sitting at number 2. That's going to factor in, I guarantee you. Watch when they get into the playoffs, the fact that
that's going to matter.
They will not have an extra home game if they don't hold that number 1 spot. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. That's 7A Region 2. All right, Baylin, how was your sandwich?
Amazing. Demolished. I think I gave you half. You haven't even started yet.
All right, let's move on to 6A Region 1. There's really not a lot of local teams in 6A, but Mainland is in there. But the team that I'm really surprised about is New Smyrna Beach High School. Coach Johnny Wilkinson has gone out there and turned that program around. They're actually getting a wild card spot right now. This is a program that's been clearly underperforming. Johnny Wilkinson shows up. They start performing. No surprise here. He was a longtime coach at Cocoa, won state championships there. So Mainland and New Smyrna Beach are your 2 teams locally. They're going to get in. Baylin, 6A is kind of not our specialty, right? Because we don't have a lot of teams. But do you see, does Mainland have a chance to really go far in this? Or is this going to be an offseason for Mainland?
I think the best thing they did was go down to 6A. They do have an opportunity to make some noise. I think they have enough talent to go far in the playoffs, probably make a state championship berth, but I think that there are a lot of good teams in front of them right now in that division and in that playoff spots. I do see Mainland, going probably second round at best, maybe third. But I do like the surprising story of New Smyrna Beach going into the playoffs as a wild card spot. Obviously, the coach has done a lot of good things at Cocoa High School when he was there. He won several state championships, so he knows what winning is like and how to motivate players to play for him and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how far they actually go. But yeah, Mainland does have the talent to go far, but I don't see them winning the state championship this year, but they got an opportunity.
Yeah, so interesting side note right now, if New Smyrna Beach were to actually get that number 8 spot, like the final wild card, they'd be the 8 seed, which means they'd have to travel to Pensacola.
Right, so
that's quite the drive. But hats off to Johnny Wilkinson for being in the conversation. That's 6A Region 1. All right, Baylin, let's move on to 5A Region 2. There's really nobody in Region 1 that we want to talk about, but Region 2 has a couple local teams that I know Baylin loves. That's Jones High School. They're sitting at the number 1 spot. And then we have Bishop Moore High School sitting at the 5 spot. They'll probably end up being a 6 seed, though, just because of the way the district champs are going to play out. But either way, those are the 2 local teams, Jones and Bishop Moore, who are going to represent 5A Region 2. The cool story with 5A is that we could possibly be looking at a Jones versus Rockledge regional championship game
to go to state
down the road. So that's a game to look out for on the list. Baylin, I'm going to go ahead and do this again to you. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Jones versus Rockledge in the region champion. If this actually plays out, who do you got?
Well, I like Rockledge. I think that they could be easily in our top 10. They don't play too many Central Florida teams, if any, at all. That's why we don't really talk about them much, but they are a powerhouse here in the state of Florida. But I'm going with Jones. I think Jones High School has a good opportunity of beating Rockledge. I think that they have speed everywhere. I'm not going to pick Jones against that. I'm going to go for our local team here. Obviously, I've been high on Jones all year. I don't think they lose. I think they will see each other in the 3rd or 4th round to go to the state championship. But by getting to the state championship, I think both teams do have a problem ahead of them with American Heritage, also with Miami Northwestern in the mix. So that'll be an interesting matchup in a state championship. But first, they got to get through each other. And I do see Jones winning that game if they were to meet up later on the season.
Another team to look out for, he mentioned Miami Northwestern, American Heritage. Those teams are another one to look out for, those. O'Galley, however you want to say it. They are a team that's actually coming on strong. That's going to do it for 5A Region 2. All right, Baylin, let's take a look at 4A Region 2. If we're talking about 4A, we're talking about one team. That's Cocoa. Cocoa is the team that's clearly dominated this region. They've dominated 4A, in our opinion, locally. Baylin, you've been calling this all year long. I want to ask you the question. I'm going to put you on the spot again. Is Cocoa going to lose a game?
If you have been watching this show for the last 3 weeks, this is the 4th week we've been doing this. I have made it perfectly clear when we're talking about 4A that there's only one team to really talk about, and that's Cocoa. I think the best thing they did was go down to 4A. They're going to dominate. I think they're way through the playoffs. They're not going to lose a game for the rest of the year. They're going to win state. They're going to go to state. But I am going to make the claim of winning state. They have a pretty good team. I think if they go to the state championship, I don't know who that's going to be yet because I feel like that Cocoa is going to be the top dog in this, Heath, as I mentioned before. They're sitting at number 1. They have all year, and I think that I made it clear. And again, if we talk about this next week, Cocoa will still be my champion. So they're going to sit at the number 1 spot in 4A.
Interesting storyline with 4A is obviously the state championships are going to be held up in Tallahassee.
Right.
So they would have to leave the local market, obviously, to win their state championship. But I'll call it right now. The team they're going to play in the state championship is going to be Jacksonville Bulls.
Ooh.
That's going to do it for 5A2. All right, that's going to do it for this week's RPI show. A couple cool things that we would like to mention is the fact that Central Florida is representing strong right now in the state of Florida. There's 4 teams right now that hold the number 1 seed in their region. Dr. Phillips fell from 1 to 3. We would have 5 if they didn't. But either way, I'm proud of Orlando. I'm proud of Central Florida for holding strong. Baylin, I know that we have a lot of good teams here to look forward to watching. There's besides the 1 seeds, there's a lot of good teams we got look forward to watching. Baylin, is there anybody that jumps off the page to you?
Yes. Again, we talked about a good mainland team. Vieira's right there on the cusp. I think Rockledge team that we don't really talk about, they're going to make some noise. I think the Edgewater is going to make their way against Lakeland. I think eventually Armwood's going to ease their way out. But I do see Lakeland probably winning in the whole thing, unfortunately, for Edgewater. But I do think Lakeland is the best team in all of the state of Florida, which you just mentioned. I think Dr. Phillips can make a deep run in the playoffs. I feel like they
always do.
I think they can go to the game before states, and then they could potentially go to a state championship if they get things clicking like they are right now. But like I said, usually where they're sitting now after this point in the season, we know your team's going to be lined up. It's going to be interesting to see if Lake Nona, I think that's the storyline of all the classes, in my opinion. If Lake Nona can find their way into the final spot, I think they have the best chance as far as the ones that are outside looking in. Lake Brantley is a team, again, we cut off, and they are right there at number 9. So that would be crazy if they could somehow get there. New Smyrna Beach, very happy for that program, that they're now in the wild card spot right now. That's going to be exciting stuff in that area, even though they do have to play the 1 seed if they make it. That'll be interesting. But like I said, Heath, those are the storylines that I think we got out of this week.
Yeah, Baylin, good stuff there. So this Thursday at 7 o'clock on ESPN Radio, we're going to have our normal show. So tune in on 7 o'clock on ESPN 580 Orlando. For Heath, Ziglar, and Baylin Trujillo and Graffiti Junction College Park, thank you so much for joining the show.